Hey there. So I'm having a look at the new moon in Cancer, and I recorded this whole video yesterday, and overnight I've just been thinking, oh God, I feel really uncomfortable because I'm talking about really, really high emotional states, really high charged stuff, and it's really sort of happening globally and also personally. And right now the world seems to be full of grief and frustration and division. And there's I think an urgency. It feels like we're being really kind of pushed through a whole series of not even our own decisions, but it feels like decisions are being made for us. And I know that that's how I'm feeling, and I'm quite sure you're probably feeling a bit like that yourself. And so I realized that as I was recording this particular video yesterday, I felt some dis-ease. I was feeling really quite awkward, because I know that when I've spoken about getting out of our emotions and kind of going into a neutrality, different people viewing it from different political sides have thought that, I obviously wasn't supporting them, and therefore I must be the other side, and vice versa. And so really what I want to share here is that this is really not about telling anyone what to think or feel. It's about offering an astrological mirror, so that you can kind of come home to what that is saying. Like who are you in your center, and where are you with your wisdom and also your own truth. The other thing is, I'm human and my delivery is organic. It's not like I'm working from a big old script or anything, and I'm not sort of checking my notes every 5 minutes. I'm really coming from a place of my own feeling of here we go. You can see this is like obviously how I am. I'm coming from my own good place, and I'm speaking from my own heart, and it's organic, and it's raw, and it's honest, and sometimes it's really messy. And I know some of you love that, and I know some don't, and that's okay. And during this forecast, I am going to be talking about emotions, and I'm not saying don't feel. Obviously, this is a new moon in Cancer forecast, and so there's a lot going on with with our emotions, especially seeing as Jupiter's there as well, making it really big. But what I'm saying is, don't let our emotions drag us or drag you away from your clarity, away from your peace, and away from your power. Emotion is definitely valid, and I'm not saying you're not justified to feel emotional or upset or triggered. But your emotions don't often tell you the truth. Often emotions are taking you away from your truth, taking you away from your power, and taking you away from your ultimate clarity. And my forecasts, I think, are about you, like helping everyone get clearer. I mean, I do these for myself as well, so that I feel clearer about what's going on. Just to make it really clear, I'm not expecting you to agree with everything I say, and you don't have to like it. But I do invite you to stay curious if you found my work helpful before, and something feels a bit off. It might be worth asking, asking, why does this make me feel uncomfortable? Because I really do think that where we feel triggered, that trigger is our teacher. It's really showing us something quite deep. I do think there's going to be a few of those triggers coming up. I mean, there are two big YODS that I'm going to be talking about, and these two YODS are pointing towards Pluto and also Mars, and so they're talking about really raw power, and how we can get from that place of rage, which I think a lot of people have been channeling from a place of rage and despair. And when we look underneath rage, sometimes we find fear and grief, but these are times of really big extremes. And it would be very easy to assume that I'm talking from one extreme and not your extreme. But really, I'm not here to choose sides. I'm just kind of holding the space of this astrological mirror. It's a paradox, and this is all about our healing. I think underneath all of this, we all are wanting to feel safe, seen, heard. We need to know that we matter. I really, really think that. And that's the thread that I'm hoping that all of my forecasts have really got that sense, that I'm threading all these planetary aspects and my interpretations together to create something that's healing and helpful. So if you're here with an open heart, I think this will be useful, and you're very welcome to be here. And so, yeah, my invitation is to let's walk through this new moon together. It might not be perfect. Like I say, it's probably going to get messy, but this is coming from a place of hopefully high consciousness, and, you know, goodwill for all of us. Just to remind you, the previous moon was the full moon in Sagittarius. So we've been in this full moon in Sagittarius phase, and we're currently in it going towards the new moon. I think this has got a lot more to do with our need to sort of check in deep inside with our sense of God, our sense of faith. Even if you're not religious, you know, what is it that you believe in? Do you believe in yourself? And, you know, after this new moon on the 25th of June, we're then heading from the new moon in Cancer to the full moon in Capricorn. And that full moon in Capricorn on the 10th of July. Well, there's a lot of disruption happening at this new moon point. You know, did you know, like, it's in a conjunction to Asteroid Chaos and also Truth. So I do think at these kind of ground shaking times where it feels like the ground is about to just drop away from us, you know, that's the chaos. But maybe this chaos that's going on right now, as all of our structures are dissolving, maybe that chaos is leading to us to the truth, as bizarre as it may seem or feel. And from here to the full moon in Capricorn, that's going to get also very interesting. So we are really in this very deep time, and Uranus is just about to you know, change signs as well. So yeah, lots and lots of big stuff going on. So let's get this show on the road. If you're new here, my name's Louisa Tanner Munson. Welcome. Yeah, let's bring it all up and have a look. I'm going to be, let me show you. I'm going to be looking at the aspects of this particular new moon, and there's 2 yods. I mean, yods are pretty rare, to be honest. You know, they don't come up very often. They need a very precise alignment to come up. The yods are known as the finger of fate or the finger of God. And so it is a little bit like with this new moon in Cancer, we are being nudged. There is this energy that is nudging us forwards, this kind of finger of God, this nudging us forwards on our spiritual path. But we've not got one, we've got 2. So we've got 2 of these fingers nudging us from different perspectives, which I think is kind of interesting. You know, the yods are about karmic triggers and unexpected events. And they bring up a lot of discomfort, a lot of discomfort. So I'm going to be looking at the aspects of this new moon, and the yods are going to form quite a bit of it. I'm going to have a look at the Sabian symbol as well, which is really telling, really super telling. It really speaks of where we are right now. And also include the named asteroids, you know, that are either in a conjunction, opposition, or square to this particular new moon in Cancer. And I can say there's a lot, there's a lot in here. You know, this is about power, purpose, and our emotional truth. And I also think it's the purity. I think there is this sense of purity coming in to burn away all of what we see in our reality that feels unclean in us, or maybe in our world. There is this very, very strong feeling right now. So what I'm going to do is just say thank you to everybody that supports this channel. There are lots of different ways if you want to. But yeah, thank you to everybody who does that. That really helps me out. Anyway, this new moon in Cancer is happening on the 25th of June, 2025. And it's come right after the full moon in Sagittarius, which, you know, was highly emotional and was just after Jupiter went into Cancer, which is interesting because Jupiter is ruled by Sagittarius and Cancer rules the moon. So it was interesting that we had the full moon in Sagittarius just before. There's a real sort of like Sagittarius into Cancer theme, I would say, with this new moon in Cancer. You know, we're moving on from this new feeling of like, where is my faith right now? You know, am I really, is my life somehow aligned to a purpose? You know, Jupiter really brings up some big questions. You know, he's very questing, you know, and at its highest expression, I think Jupiter is connecting us into this sense of faith, optimism, and a sense of hope. And in the sign of Cancer, he's exalted. So I see this really sort of healing opportunity coming up. Now, when we actually look at this particular This is the chart for the new moon. I should say I'm in the London time zone. I'm sat in Portugal, not far from Lisbon, but Lisbon and London are in the same time zone. And the time zone for London, UK, is the midpoint of all time zones in the world. So this is why I always set my charts for midday. So this is set in my time zone, but you can see that the sun, the moon, they're always together at the time of the new moon, and they're very close to Jupiter. Really close. Now, Jupiter's not that strong when he's very close to the sun. You know, he's drowned out. He's under the beams of the sun's rays. You know, the sun really, the sun is the big ego in the solar system. And so Jupiter gets a little bit sidestepped. But the day before the new moon, Jupiter is like, there's the Jupiter Cazimi where the sun and Jupiter were exactly together. And it's like all hail, like Jupiter. It's, you know, everything to do with expansion, hope and optimism was absolutely highlighted. So it would be great if you could listen to this before the 24th, because if you are listening before the 24th, I think it's a great idea to connect in with your truth. What is the truth of your existence? What is the truth? Where does your hope and optimism come from? What is your biggest hope? What is your biggest sense of purpose in this world right now? So I think, you know, the astrology is absolutely bringing us much closer to the truth. And, you know, Jupiter, it rules Sagittarius. He also rules the sign of Pisces. We've got Sagittarius and Pisces, you know, have Jupiter as their rulers. You know, and Sagittarius is very much about the philosophical truth, the expanse, the feeling of joy and optimism. And Pisces is really bringing that touch of spirituality into play as well, and deep healing. So even though Jupiter's not highlighted by the sun necessarily, I still think there's a definite Jupiter theme here, especially seeing as he's exalted. So this is a healing new moon. And if we think of the themes of Cancer, we've got family, safety, security, mother-child, like parent relationships. And I would also say the family is really important. Now, I say that quite pointedly because the next big moon after that will be the full moon in Capricorn on the 10th of July. So we're going from the previous full moon in Sagittarius to new moon in Cancer, which I think is really emphasizing the faith and optimism and bringing us back to the family religion, the family feeling of togetherness and connectedness. And then from the new moon in Cancer to the full moon in Capricorn, we're really seeing the juxtaposition between the family and security and safety and what is local to us and our history and what that counts for versus the idea of a corporatocracy, the idea of big business, the idea of money over people. So are we talking about substance here? I think, you know, the new moon in Cancer is really talking about the substance, what really makes us feel like we're alive, you know, because the full moon in Capricorn, and no disrespect to any Capricorns here, I love Capricorns. In fact, I dated one for 11 years. So like, I love the Capricorn energy. I love the fact that Capricorn energy can create longevity, and doesn't seem to get put off by these massive challenges. But the full moon in Capricorn is going to really bring us face to face with where we use power and legislation without purpose. You know, it's going to bring us face to face to the darker sides of looking after money and nothing else. So yeah, this is a really important moment in time, this new moon in Cancer. I really can't stress it enough. I really truly can't. Now, this is also in a very, very tight square to Neptune and Saturn. So if you follow this channel, you'll know that in the last set of forecasts I did from the full moon in Sagittarius to the new moon in Cancer, I was really talking about the Jupiter and Saturn square, because that has been going on and off for 9 months. Actually, no, 11 months. You know, it was going from August last year and it's easing off now. No, 10 months. There you go. That's the actual answer. It's been on and off. It's gone into the exact square 3 times, but it's more or less been in a square the whole time. And that is kind of the battle between Jupiter, which is a Sagittarius kind of energy, and also Saturn, which is very much a Capricorn energy. And funnily enough, we're going in between the full moon in Sagittarius and the full moon in Capricorn. So this new moon in Cancer is like the bridging point between the hopeless optimism, and it can be a bit chaotic, and it can be a little bit unstructured, but it's definitely looking for purpose. And then this kind of cold, sterile status, this ambition that forgets the purpose behind it. And so I really think this new moon in Cancer is the important point in between these two full moons, really, really showing us that we need purpose to underpin everything we do in our life. And I think actually what we're seeing in the world right now is that we're seeing the end result of the fact that many of us, I include myself in that, many of us have taken or made choices that maybe haven't had purpose underpinning them. And you know, when we're all working from a position of survival and competition, because I think, you know, when we are in a place of fear for our survival, we do think quite competitively. In that competition, we forget we forget who we are. And so I think this new moon in Cancer is drilling into us the big question: who am I? What is my purpose here? Why do I exist? Why am I here right now at this time? And it's huge. This isn't to be kind of sniffed at or laughed at. You know, this is a really big question we're all asking ourselves, I think. Something else that's really great about this, I love this. You know, Venus, she's in her own sign of Taurus, very, very happy. At the time of this new moon in Cancer, she is in a trine with the South Node, really showing that it's quite easy to tune into what was good in the past and to remember all the good times. And also, you know, we can also connect to the idea of a future too. You know, she is almost able to see both parts of the timeline. And of course, there's so much more of our history. And obviously, we don't know what's in our future necessarily. And so we can really connect into the past and what felt good. I remember probably about 8 years ago or so seeing MTV on telly. And I hadn't seen it for like years and years and years. And all of a sudden, it took me back to a time in my teenage years when I felt optimistic. I mean, do you remember that time? I mean, has there been a time like that for you where you've had I realized, I mean, I must have been a young teen, and I felt that there was nothing I had to fear. I really didn't fear going out into the world. I thought the world was a really fun place. And I was kind of sort of excited and expectant, you know, and the music in the late 80s, before it got sort of grungy in the 90s, it was quite optimistic. It was quite happy and kind of chipper and upbeat and stuff. I love the 80s music, by the way. But anyway, there was this feeling of safety. And when I looked back, you know, and thought, oh my God, how did I lose that feeling of everything's okay? There are no monsters, you know, hidden behind cupboards or behind doors or anything, you know. When I felt so safe, I really felt the missing of that safety. I was really quite moved by it. And so I think this new moon in Cancer is going to remind us of times when maybe we have felt secure, because it's not until we remember that we have been secure that we might realize just how sort of unsafe we feel right now. And I think a lot of this happened also. I think a lot of this got worse around the time of the COVID narrative and the phenomenon of it that came up and really took over the world for quite a while. You know, it really sowed its seeds into our consciousness in a huge way. And I'm pretty sure that would have wrecked so many people's lives, you know, irrespective of what actually happened, you know, when people got ill and stuff, and not trying to demean it. But the consciousness of people, I think so many people felt, you know, that they had some agency in their life, and all of a sudden that was gone. And there was this what appeared as a very, very real threat. And so I think, you know, around the time of the new moon, we've got this opportunity to remember when that safety was. Now we've also got these, there's no other way of ignoring it or overlooking it. We've got these two YODS. So in case you don't know, a YOD is formed by, you'll see here, these like little green dotted lines. That's how they're shown up on the website astro.com, which is what I use to do all these charts. I use them because everyone can use them. You know, I always like to use things that people can recreate their own charts and look at, you know, so I want it to be accessible to everyone. So a YOD is formed from this angle here. It's a 150-degree angle. It's known as a quincunx or an inconjunct. I'm going to call it a quincunx, even though it's a ridiculously difficult word to pronounce, really. It's not easy. It doesn't trip off the tongue. And so a YOD is made when you've got two quincunxes meeting in the middle. And it's also known as a finger of fate or a finger of God. And the theory behind this is that where the two quincunxes are pointing to is describing a potential direction or a potential resolution point where things can come together. You know, I mean, these are very tense. Quincunxes are not easy, you know, so we've got a quincunx here between Jupiter, the moon and the sun in the sign of Cancer, which is a cardinal sign, versus Pluto in an air sign that's fixed. There's no areas that Jupiter, the moon and Cancer can really relate to Pluto and vice versa. They don't relate to each other, and yet they're working together somehow. And so, and they're not in opposition. At least with an opposition, you can see something is directly opposing. You know, there is this sense that there is somebody absolutely opposing your view. But yeah, it's not in an opposition, but it's not in a trine. Like there's no empathy between these planets and this planet. They've got to work together, coming from very, very different ways of seeing things. And so you've got this quincunx here between these three planets and Pluto, and then there's a quincunx between Mars and Pluto. Pointing at this YOD. But then we've got another YOD because we've also got a quincunx between Mars and Saturn and Neptune. So this is two YODs involving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 planets. Now, this rarely happens that we have 7 planets all pretty much at the same degrees. You know, there's a very, very tight accuracy with these YODs. So they really have to work out. But these two YODs are really quite incredible, and they bring a lot of tension and a real. They need a lot of consciousness to be able to be worked through. Really, really, truly. So if we have a look at the YOD one, and if I go to this one, so we've got the quincunx between. And if you see me looking up, it's because I've written some notes because it's such a big aspect. You know, I just want to know that I'm like really capturing this. So the new moon in Cancer is about new emotional starts and really wanting to anchor in this deeper sense of safety, which I've already mentioned. And it's also intuitive and knowing. And we've got Jupiter there as well, which is amplifying this and also bringing a very strong spiritual significance. Now, we've also got Pluto, which is about power. It's also about our shadow, and it's also very transformative. And so that is really calling us, I think, to shed our outmoded ways of thinking. Our outmoded emotional patterns are being challenged. You know, there is this shaking going on. We are rebirthing our ideas on what safety means, and our spiritual beliefs around this. To me, this is, I think, encouraging us to find our own spiritual sovereignty, you know, so that we're not putting all our hopes onto one entity or person or God, or, you know, so nothing is our answer, but we become our own answer. That's my feeling. And then we've also got Mars involved in this as well. And, you know, Mars is all about will and action and assertion and sovereignty. He's also warlike. And, you know, Pluto, you know, deep power transformations. He's a shadow. He is the underworld as well. Both of these planets are known for being a little bit on the selfish side as well. However, I think when you work beyond them, the gifts that they give are far from selfish, but they are transformative. And so this quincunx is, I think, smoldering, is really pushing us to confront how we use power, and also how we might misuse power, And I think it's intense. We're going to feel a lot of impulses and probably feel a little bit off kilter. And I really think we're needing to transmute all of our rage or upset or it's not fair or whatever into agency and come into this place of really deep strength. And then we've got the Saturn one, the one using Saturn and Neptune. And so Saturn and Neptune, I mean, they're not even easy bedfellows. I mean, Saturn's about boundaries and karmic lessons and restrictions and delays, and Neptune's dreams, ideals, ideologies and spirituality and being, going through the veils with some kind of transcendence. And of course, Mars connecting with these two, I think, is pushing us forward. It's asking us to align with our soul. And there might be some discipline that we need to take, to be able to align with our soul. And so, I think these two YODS are really pointing at us becoming a spiritual warrior in our own right. But this quincunx here is involved in both of them. So this is really, really strong. Now, I think if you've got a Scorpio sun, Scorpio moon, an angle in the sign of Scorpio, in particular an ascendant, anyone with a really strong Scorpio energy is going to feel this because Mars and Pluto are the two rulers of Scorpio. I've got Scorpio rising, so this is definitely something coming up for me. I can really feel it. So if you remember, this is a smoldering push to confront how, what your relationship is with power, and how you can use any of that sort of like tension, that sort of rage, that anger, that indignancy, arrogance as well that can come up with it, and how can this be transformed to us feeling like we've got this emotional safety. How can we align our soul with this higher mission so that we feel like we have our own agency, that we are our own spiritual warriors? This is such a complex and really, really deep moment. I think this is a sacred recalibration, bringing out themes of power, purpose, and emotional truth. And of course, when you have your realization about your emotional truth, it's going to bring up this feeling of purity. And of course, once we have a feeling of where purity is taking us, we might want to burn it out, like, we will sort of burn away anything that doesn't really match. So this is huge. Now, if we have a look at the Sabian symbol as well. So just in case you don't know, but you may well know, there are these things called Sabian symbols. There's 360 of these representing the 360 degrees. If I show you here, like every chart has 360 degrees. There are 30 degrees in every sign of the zodiac. And so every one of these little degrees has a different meaning. And so I'm looking at the Sabian symbol for 4 degrees. It's 4 degrees 08, sorry. And so it gets rounded up to the next one. And there's this fabulous website called sabiansymbols.com. And if you go there, it's Linda Hill's website. And if you type in Cancer and 4 degrees, it will automatically, what's the word? Round it up. That's it. Round it up to Cancer 5. And so this is the meaning. This is the interpretation. This is a channeled interpretation for what 4 degrees of Cancer represents. And so this might sound a bit like weird at first, but we'll explore this. So what's really coming up here? I just checked my recording, and as I looked at it, it said 22:33. Love that. So anyway, at a railroad crossing, a car races with a train. Okay. This symbol implies the desire or the ability to compete with or take on society as if life were a race or something to be conquered. The car is a vehicle for the individual and the train a vehicle for the masses. There is often a need for caution. The individual will not always survive a collision with a more powerful collective. It may not work to be insisting bravely that your individual needs should be considered. The collective has too much momentum. If someone pits themselves and their energies continually against society, sooner or later they're likely to lose. Not looking to the consequences of one's actions, running against the grain of others, cars, trains, individual rights, rebelling, split-second timing, taking one's chances. So this sounds like even though, this new moon, I think is about us finding peace and safety and security, there is an underlying theme here, which I think really matches the Mars and Pluto quincunx, which is really giving us a smoldering push, this finger of God, turning rage into agency. But here, this to me is symbolizing the rage and not so much the agency. This is where we might, if we're feeling very emotional, which people can do with these new moons, we might feel very reckless. We might be being prepared to sacrifice others, like there's this lovely question that my husband told me about 14 years ago. And I love this question. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Now, when push comes to shove, I always go to happy. And at first I might say, I want to be right. And then instantly I know, actually, I want to be happy. But there will be people around us. And you may well feel like this yourself, because Lord knows we all do from time to time, but you might feel like you are so right and that you want to be right and not happy. And in that energy of wanting to be right, it's quite a pushing energy. It's like, I am right and you're wrong. And in that moment of being right, you can't see the other perspective. Whereas if you choose happiness, you might actually be open to listening to other things. And so this is why I said that, this is one of the downsides of this particular degree, being prepared to sacrifice others. So there is this energy whereby someone might decide to be right in that moment and take action without thinking about who it's affecting, and the result of this. There's also another side to this, working until one drops. I know that feeling. And you might know that too. Not knowing when to stop, emotional panic. I talk about this at the end, by the way, spinning out of control, going off the rails. So this is such a really strong energy. Like, I use the Sabian symbols in most of my moon forecasts, and they don't often come out quite as strong as this. But to me, this is really saying, there is this feeling of like, you might be taking on the world, you might be taking on the establishment, you might be right and taking on something so much bigger than you that you cannot possibly win. And also you might not be aware of the collateral of doing so. Now this also goes both ways. So, if we're all in our emotions at this particular moment in time, we could all be kind of taking on the world. And what occurs to me is, when we're seeing everything as one or the other, we're missing a point. We're really missing something, because most people underneath their anger, their feelings of rage, their feelings of upset, their feelings of real grief, because I think underneath anger is usually grief. And so I really am talking about this collective grief that I know a lot of people are really tuned into right now. This grief, this how unfair, this is unfair, I need to do something about this, how can this be happening? When we go to anger, and we, it's this kind of judgmental anger, or this righteous anger, this has to happen. This is the energy that is coming up at the time of the new moon. And of course, there's so much more I'm going to touch on. To me, this is like seeing this particular Sabian symbol is saying, this is maybe not the best way to use your energy. The quincunxes are really showing, and the finger of YODS, the fact there are two of them, to me is saying, look, there is a massive nudging from God or the universe to put us back on our spiritual path. And maybe your God believes, or maybe your worldview is okay with confrontation. And there are lots and lots of other ways of seeing things. But I really think if we're talking about getting back on our spiritual path, there's a whole other context, a whole other way of doing what you might want to do. And again, I'm not being specific about anything because I don't know you personally. And, I'm delivering this to in the hope that this is helpful, so that that there are some real dangers coming up with this particular new moon, like pitting yourself against something in such a way, even though you might lose, even though you might not see the consequences of your actions. And this is what this Sabian symbol is showing. Now, if we have a look now at the extra stuff, so we're having a look at 2 trans-Neptunian objects, a centaur and an asteroid. Now, if you have a look at this, this is so interesting. You wouldn't you can't really write this stuff. So Asteroid Chaos is in a conjunction with the Sun, the Moon, and Jupiter. Just as I've just read out that Sabian symbol, like chaos. Now, these extra bodies, they've been named by men, or women. They've been named by humans. And so they're usually named because of what's coming up at that time or because of the person that found them. But I really like to put in these named asteroids and trans-Neptunian objects, these TNOs, because there's always a story around the name. And I think that can give us a lot of rich information. And so we've got chaos. Now, Asteroid Chaos, and the word chaos, it's coming from the void, coming from the nothing where everything can exist, and where nothing is judged. It's like that place of unlimited potential, anarchy. And so it is also what's coming from everything breaking down, disorder, disarray, new and fresh, and a birthing. I realize I'm actually looking at Asbolus, but like chaos here, this is one I want to go to first, from the void. And so we might be at our own voids at this point where all of a sudden everything about us, like we forget who we are, and in that moment we are this pure potential of something. And if we are the pure potential of rage, that really may not be who you really are. And so this chaos energy at the time of the new moon, I think is maybe pushing us into a whole new potential for something. And if you can sense that in yourself, you might want to choose a new something to be the potential of around this time. Maybe something new and fresh that's birthing something. I don't know. Let's go back. So there's also Asbolus, who was a centaur, and he had the gift of prophecy. He had his finger on the pulse of reality. He was a seer, a futurist. He made predictions of what was coming, and actually nobody listened to him. So, you might already feel like that. This is definitely a feeling going on at this moment in time that, we could all see this coming. To me, this is maybe a nudge. Also, if there are channels out there or books or people that you have enjoyed the predictions of or found to be useful, it might be time to listen to the seer, listen to people who are making predictions, so that instead of this nobody listens vibe, you actually get to listen to something. I think there's something useful in there. So it's interesting. That to me, it feels like actually there is something that is there that nobody's listened to that would be very helpful. And of course, we're coming from the void. We're coming from unlimited potential. Now, if we're coming from unlimited potential, there's also here's another interpretation for it. I mean, we could see it coming right now. Like if we're looking at what's going on in the US and also Iran and Israel. And also, I mean, Russia, Ukraine, that's not even mentioned anymore because there are 2 new big stories. I'm sure there's hundreds of other stories going on as well. But what we're hearing, if you listen to the news, is there's this anarchy, everything's breaking down, there's this disorder. But what if you were brought to the void of unlimited potential? This could represent that you come into a way of being that you've never been before, that maybe all of your thoughts and judgments and ideas as to what's going on in the world and what is needed is suddenly kind of like wiped. Like we have this wiped, fresh consciousness where something really new, like a brand new potential that is really needed in the world, in particular one that might answer why we don't feel safe and what we can do about it. And maybe the actual realization is the real safety comes from knowing that there is nothing we can do. It doesn't sound very optimistic, but when you actually know what you're dealing with, it might actually be easier to understand and easier to understand your life fully. Now, we've also got Hermes weighing in. He's the god of travelers. He's the Greek to Mercury, our Roman planet. So Hermes is, the god of travelers, thieves and merchants. So there's a lot to do with the markets here. Also the movement of people moving around. and also not necessarily reputable people moving around. But he's also a messenger between the humans and gods. So this is a time when you can really tune in again to the truth or the possibilities, the predictions of other people. You know, they may well represent a God energy or a universal energy. They might be tuning into a clear channel. You may well have that channel yourself. You might be able to answer your own questions, which I think would be amazing. So there's a lot of information, but there's a difficulty about it. Maybe it's a difficulty in how it's received or how it's delivered. To me, this also maybe represents information going down, that like there is it could be information going down, our roots to information going down, and also seeing as Hermes is also the god of merchants, it might also represent money and markets and things like that. I noticed, because I've already done my slides for the full moon in Capricorn, Hermes is moving around with the moon, Hermes is moving around so much so, that he is exactly square to the moon and the moon, which will be down here, and the sun up here at the time of the full moon in Capricorn. So Hermes is a big character. So this is the markets, the communications. That includes the news. That includes social media. That includes everything that you're told is happening. It is stressful, and maybe it's disappearing or changing. So we might not get information. We might actually have to be the Hermes ourselves, going from ourself to God or the universe or your higher self or your guides or whoever. But to me, this is a message that there is a level of sacredness that needs to come in right now. And then we've also got, and this isn't a god necessarily, and I don't know how to pronounce this. I'm not it's not that I'm not a fan of Tolkien. I just don't really know Tolkien's work aside from Lord of the Rings. But Manwe, maybe that might be the wrong pronunciation. Apologies. But Manwe is a character who, and this name was given to a trans-Neptunian object. Now, this character represented like hope and the potential for redemption, but it also, like, I think Manwe is a very strong leader, or series of leaders, but there is an ultimate triumph of good, the eventual restoration of humanity. To me, this is almost like and you know, I don't want to compare it to Jesus or other messengers from God in case I'm accused of blasphemy. But for instance, if blasphemy wasn't an issue, Manwe, you know, is almost an emissary of God, an emissary coming to execute God's law, and to bring back God's law. And by God's law, I don't think that necessarily means I smite thee or anything like that. It may be a return to goodness. And if you think of the new moon in Cancer, that's what I think. I think of goodness. How can goodness be restored? And so I see Manwe here. Anyone, well, not anyone. I think this is going to bring up a lot of leaders or people into our worldview, into our line of sight. I think it's going to bring up lots of people who are really wanting to bring hope and redemption to the world and a restoration of goodness. So I really do see that this is going on. So we've got a messenger between the humans and gods, and then a emissary of God, both also working in a very stressed out way with the chaos of a whole new world breaking, you know, like that everything is breaking down so that something new can come about. And also there is the tension that we probably could have predicted this if we'd listened to people warning us about it. If we'd listened to people that had said, hey, did you hear about that? And you're like, oh, no, I haven't got time for that today. You know, I think whatever we're finding ourselves in a week's time, I'm recording this on the 18th. To me, this is epitomizing this. It's pretty big. So to me, it just feels like it's game on. We've got a whole new story coming up. It is unusual that we've got the double YODS. Like I say, that doesn't happen very often. And Mars and Pluto are highlighted. And of course, you know, Mars, you know, he's the god of war, but also the god of taking action. He's a planet to do with us, our sovereignty. And you could say our freedom to move around and our freedom to make our own decisions and take action in our life. And Pluto, very much the god of the underworld, but also the unclean parts, the shadow sides of us that we've had to hide away and maybe not face. So Mars and Pluto, how can we come clean with ourselves? To me, this is very, very strong energy. Also, between this new moon and like, let's say from the full moon in Sagittarius, the previous big moon, to this one, Jupiter just literally changed signs. And then if we go from this new moon to the next full moon in Capricorn, we've got Uranus going into its next sign. So just either side of this new moon, we've got Jupiter changing signs and also Uranus changing signs. Both of them have a tendency for truth and consciousness and a hope. And Uranus in particular is really unafraid to take these massive, shocking actions. And so this is huge that like both Jupiter and Uranus have just changed signs either side, or will be changing signs either side of this new moon in Cancer. And Uranus is also the last planet to change signs. If I go down here, let me highlight that so it's easier to see. So in the last 9 months or so, in November, we had Pluto changing signs. He changes signs every 248 years, I think. It might not be right, but it's around that. So it's like a really, really long time for Pluto to not to change signs. Sorry, he takes it varies, sort of 20 years, 30 years to change signs. It's just taken him 15 years. This next one is 20 years, but for his whole orbit, it's like 200 and so many years. The North Node has just changed signs in January. That changes. There's the North Node that changes every 18 months. So that's not so uncommon, but it's pretty strong, happening straight after Pluto changing signs. Then 2 months later, Neptune changes signs. Now, he is going to be spending 14 years in the sign of Aries. So again, it's not an everyday occurrence. And then we've got Saturn, who's just changed signs and gone into Aries in a conjunction with Neptune, no less. Saturn changes signs every 2.5 years. Again, it's not that common. Then Jupiter's just changed signs. He changes signs every year. Again, it's not that uncommon. And then we've got the last one, Uranus. And Uranus, can take between 7-8 years in a particular sign. It takes him 84 years to go around. So we've got all of these planets that are very slow moving. These are the 5 slowest moving planets. These are all associated with our understanding and how consciousness comes into us, and also the energies that aren't sowing the seeds of our personality, but they're sowing the seeds of our generations, our planetary consciousness. These are all very, very hard to articulate and to integrate into our lives, but they've all shifted between November and July. That's a very, very short space of time for all of that to go down. So it's no long, this is no surprise that things I feel are about to really kick off or really change and really shake us to the core. And Uranus is the last planet of all of these, so Pluto, Neptune, Saturn, the North Node, Jupiter, and then finally Uranus. It's like a train. Each one of these planets is kind of pushing us forwards, knocking us off a balance a little bit, showing us a new possibility, but one after the other. In all of the things that I've listened to and studied, and I've tried to research, tried to go back, I can't get back to a time when all of them have changed within such a short space of time of each other. And I've tried using AI to find it as well, and I wasn't able to find it. Steve Judd, he said, like, we don't know how long this has been, but it's been over thousands and thousands of years, but we have no record of when this would have happened last. So this, whatever is going on right now, is huge. And like I said, this new moon seems to be really picking up the flavor of it. So Uranus is the last planet to change signs, and it's going to be game on. And that's changing signs on the 7th of July. So not much further than the new moon in Cancer. But you can see Uranus is really getting ready. He's at the 29th degree, which is notoriously rebellious. Then we're sort of descending into chaos. Asteroid Chaos is in the conjunction here as well, really sort of whipping that into a frenzy. Some of us have ignored predicted signs, and we might have been ignoring predictions for years and years and years, or we might have had our own predictions going on. We might have had our own thoughts. Oh, this isn't going to end well, or this can't, like, how can this actually work? If we play out this trajectory, what will happen? I know I have pretty much my whole life. I've been thinking like that. How can that work? That doesn't make sense. What do we do? And so a lot of us, because we can't fathom it, because we're one person in a whole planet, we feel quite insecure and minuscule. And so we don't know how to become our own savior. And so a lot of us turn our blind eye to it until we're ready to be able to face it. I think now we're needing to face it. And so it's a warlike scenario with God's law for all that's good, in particular with the finger of Yod pointing at Mars and Pluto, feels very warlike. And I put does good hurt. I meant to take that out. I was just thinking, someone says to me, if it hurts, it's not love. If it hurts, it's not good. And yet right now, lots of people are hurting and really focusing on the hurt. And I'm not judging you if you're feeling hurt right now, by the way. I have my own feelings as well going on when I see what's going on around. We're all humans having reactions, and for a lot of us, it doesn't feel very good. And then with the Sabian symbol saying the race is on, and that you may encounter danger if you're fighting the masses, danger when you're fighting the current trajectory. And it feels like things are just rolling out and there's nothing that we can do to stop it. It just feels like the future is playing out right now. So, my question is, how can you find a sense of peace and gentleness and calm as this, to me, it's like a storm of energy, with Uranus about to change signs, and everything going on. It just feels like it's coming in, it's washing over us, like a huge wave. I live by the ocean, so when I think of these waves, I think this is like a massive tidal wave coming in and like washing everything away. So this just feels very, very intense, let's say. So I know this sounds like don't panic, as I say right at the end of this video. To me, I really wouldn't be surprised if the lights go out and it feels like there's nothing we can do right now, that other people have made decisions on our behalf without our consultation, and people are making these huge decisions that are affecting everyone, and there's not much we can do. And so it feels like it's lights out, time out. There's nothing we can do. There's disruption of everything we know. And so what I think is more important is that we prepare ourselves. Like we must know by now that nobody is there to save us except ourselves. We have to rely on ourselves. And, with the people we trust around us, we can trust them. But ultimately, everyone is in this themselves, for themselves. We're under this pressure together. We don't know who we can trust right now, in particular when you see things on the internet. Now also that AI videos are as precise as they are, it's very, very difficult to know what's what. So I do think we're alone. I do think we're facing our mortality. And I think this bringing us to our knees is actually bringing us back into our own faith, which is a Jupiter and Cancer energy. I think we don't know. And when we don't know, what have we got left? So I see that this new moon, again, from another perspective, it might be bringing us to our knees, but I also think it's bringing us to something deeper where we have to say, okay, I can't think this. I can't outthink whatever is going on in the world. I now need to go into trust. I need to go into hope. I need to go into faith. I need to, I had a thought the other day, when I saw this sort of posturing and different things going on between Iran and Israel. And obviously it's more than posturing, isn't it, now? And I thought if a huge bomb went off, heaven forbid, how am I going to spend my time here? Am I going to be fighting right to the end, or am I going to find myself? How do I find myself as quick as I can into peace and gratitude for what I have had? And when confronted by those questions, for me, that question was easy. It's like, if the time's up, to me, it just feels like we have to come back into our own goodness as soon as we can. And this is where I think we are coming. It looks to me like we're coming to a collapse point, a point that none of us know where we're going, and we don't know how to get out of it. Now, this may sound really dire, and yet I still think this new moon in Cancer is bringing us something more, something much deeper, and it might be a clarity coming. I don't know. So I want to go back to the words I said right at the beginning, that you might feel like the ground is shifting beneath you. And actually, I think what's actually going on right now is our life and everything around us is falling away. And it might be the untruths are falling away. It might be old truths that are no longer useful are falling away. To me, it feels like our life has been on shaky ground for a long time, and we've not noticed. It's a bit like my husband's got this phrase, and it might be from somewhere else, but we're rearranging the furniture on the Titanic. It's going down, and we're just like like messing around, but we know the trajectory of where this is going. But what's beneath this false floor of reality? What is beneath it? And I think that's the truth that you've been carrying all along. And I don't know what your truth is. I know what mine is. My truth is that I'm a spiritual being. And when the shit hits the fan and I look behind the scenes, or if I'm facing my mortality, I think, I know I'm a spiritual being. I know that this is my body, but I know there's something much more to me than that. And I think what's going on right now is bringing us to our core truth. And it's from that we might realize we can heal ourselves. So, yeah, I say don't panic. I understand that sounds kind of ridiculous when I'm reading the astrology in this way. And if you followed me for a long time, you'll know that I'm not normally giving out doom and gloom messages. I'm more trying to help us understand, that there is a new possibility. But I want to leave you with these words, and also some other asteroids. So first of all, when I ever feel really quite like, what's it all about? I often actually listen to the song Don't Panic by Coldplay. I'm not a huge fan of Coldplay, I have to say, but I really like this one because I really like when it says we live in a beautiful world. Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. I really love that. It just lights me up because it's really easy to focus on all the stuff that we're told to focus on. And I say that really quite pointedly. We're told what to focus on. We're directed to it by every single device, every single news agency. We're told what our truth is. And I think this is us coming back into our truth. And speaking of truth, because I don't want to leave it on an odd note, I put in, because I like to play with asteroids, I put in asteroid truth. I put in asteroid yes to represent something that might show us, where things are really good and where we feel really good. And also asteroid spirit to represent, if spirits exist, if you can get a message from the other side, if you can connect to your higher self, God, the universe, whatever you want to call that. And so what I see with this is fascinating, actually, that truth is also in this full moon, in this new moon with, the sun, the moon, and Jupiter in the sign of Cancer. Truth is there. The aspect of truth has always been there, and it's there. And interestingly, it's also at the same place as chaos. So through this truth, and chaos, this is where we're going. And that also asteroid spirit is also in the sign of Cancer as well. So this is why I really honestly believe that whatever chaos is going on around us that seems absolutely imminent, truth and spirit is behind it. We are coming back to our spiritual origin, our origin story. I don't know, but that feeling, we are coming back to ourselves. And then asteroid yes, it's not a million miles away from Chiron. It's not in a conjunction because asteroids have tiny conjunctions, but it's in the sign of Taurus. It's also in the place where Venus is, with her lovely connections to the North and South Node, the remembering of what it is to feel safe. And yes is also in a lovely trine with Mars. To me, this is an indication that, we are coming up to our own spiritual truth, our own knowing our own intuition, and we also need to come into an action, to take action on our truth. And that action might just be that something that you feel that you're sovereign with. This isn't something that, peace, it does sound so lost, like it's a passive thing that you do, but actually holding your truth and holding your understanding that we are going to be okay. I think that is an activity in itself. So my final thought is, where are Taurus and where are Cancer in your birth chart? If you know how to do it, do it. But like, look and see where the Cancer energy is, where this new moon in Cancer is. I know where it is in my chart. It's in my 8th house. And so I think the peace for me is coming in my 8th house, which is obviously a place of deep spirituality and transformation, and also letting go of the past hurts of ancestral wounds. For you, it might be in the sign of, in the 7th house, it might be in the 1st house, but have a look to see where this new moon is taking place in your chart and focus on that Cancerian energy and what it's asking you to do. That is, in my mind, what is going to bring you to that spiritual truth. And it might come through chaos first, but I do believe it's leading us to truth. So there you go. If you haven't had enough of me already and you do want a little bit more, then you might want to join my membership. You might not, and that's fine too. I'm not going to be doing I don't want to be doing consultations with people that I don't know over the summer. So if I haven't already met you, and you want a consultation, you have to either book something in June really quickly, and my details are below, or in September, after September, when I'm going to get going again. But if you've already got a relationship with me, or if you want to come into membership, where we'll be in, I'm in there every day, answering questions and sharing comments and relating with each other. There's a lot of benefits there. There's daily forecast Monday to Friday. There's fortnightly forecasts for all signs of the zodiac, from love and money and career and stuff. But we also have community hangouts. We had one last night, and it's a Zoom call where you can turn up if you want to. It's every 2 weeks, and we talk about all sorts of different things. And I'm always on a high afterwards because we've got such a lovely group, so much presence and consciousness there, so many really kind and generous and lovely people. We're all supporting each other, we're all looking at things. And so I lead the group. So far, we've looked at patterns in our birth charts. That's something we were doing last night, really looking at the shape of our charts, what's going on and what that might mean. We've also looked at the date of our birth and our birth charts, and then linked it into the birthdays and important dates that have happened in our life. And it's never a surprise when you see that all these important dates have fitted somewhere in your birth chart in a really miraculous way. We've also looked at transactional analysis and astrology and how they come together. We've also had a session uniquely about Saturn in Aries and our unique charts, Jupiter in Cancer, Venus retrograde, the Venus star point. We also had a full moon ceremony recently with Whitney Mullings. Coming up in the next 2 weeks, like literally in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to be doing one with Uranus and Gemini. We're also going to be doing a lot of work with the outer planets and understanding the generations, and like seeing the gift of, the generation that we're born in. So there's loads of things that come up, and it's really work in progress. I don't know where this community is going to go, but for now, it's a safe space where people that love astrology and, people from all walks of life, from all parts of the world, from Hawaii to New Zealand, we are coming together at different points, and sharing thoughts about astrology in, I think, a really intelligent but a really heartfelt and heart-led way. So if that's something that sounds like it's right up your street, and you want to get involved, all the links are below. But anyway, a different kind of forecast than usual, but one that I really, feel is really quite, really serious and sacred. What is going on around this time of the new moon? I just think big change is coming, and whatever you need to do to feel safe and protected, I think is important. I do think it's probably a good time to maybe do those things that preppers talk about, like having a little bit of food and water, and having some money and petrol in your car and things like that. I don't want to cause panic, but I do think, like we had the electricity go out for throughout the whole of Portugal and Spain not so long ago. And so we got a real kind of wake up call as we were all playing the scenarios in our head of what would happen if we had no electricity. So yeah, I think, how can you feel safe in it right now? What do you think your purpose is? I think all of this is coming into play right now. I think this is our work. So there you go. I hope that was helpful. And, if I've got time, I will be commenting if you leave comments below. But yeah, wishing you a really great new moon. I do think it's a huge opportunity. And like I said, chaos and truth. Out of the chaos comes real deep truth. And I think, when we're on that truth vibe, then we're home. So anyway, loads of love. Speak to you soon. Bye for now.